He smirked as he signed the divorce papers, convinced he'd finally outsmarted his poor, naive wife, the same woman he'd secretly stolen $10 million from to start a glittering, new life beside his glamorous mistress. But what Jonathan Hale didn't know was that the woman he'd humiliated and cast aside had unknowingly inherited the very company that would soon hire him in desperation. The same marble halls he'd walk as an employee, she would already own, silently, completely. How does a man who believes he's won it all end up serving the woman he betrayed? And what did she do that brought them both to ruin? The night that rewrote Emily Carter Hale's destiny began with laughter, not hers, but theirs. The ballroom of the St. Regis shimmered beneath golden chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection. The air pulsed with wealth and self-importance. It was the Hale Global Winter Gala, that annual spectacle where privilege masqueraded as grace and cruelty often wore perfume. Emily entered quietly. Her sapphire gown, elegant but understated, seemed almost subdued beside the glittering diamonds cascading from Olivia Grant's wrists, the same Olivia now wrapped around Jonathan's arm. The ambitious PR executive everyone whispered about was no longer hiding in shadows. Heads turned, cameras flashed. The air thickened with gossip, disguised as admiration. Jonathan raised his glass, his smile sharp enough to slice. "To new beginnings," he said, voice rich with champagne and arrogance. His gaze flicked toward Olivia as the crowd tittered with delight. The bulbs burst white heat. In every photo, Emily's stillness was mistaken for defeat. She had always been the quiet one, the engineer's daughter who valued logic over luxury, who built her husband's empire from ideas he later claimed as his own. Her father, Richard Carter, had once commanded the skyline of New York, the Carter name engraved in steel and legacy. But after his death came the debts, the betrayals, the slow erasure of everything his hands had built. And Jonathan had seemed like her savior, or so she believed. The orchestra swelled. Olivia approached, smile polished and cruel. "Emily, darling," she cooed, lifting a crystal glass filled with burgundy wine. "You must be exhausted from keeping up appearances." Emily's hands trembled, just once, but her voice was calm. "Appearances fade, character doesn't." The room went still, a silence delicate as glass. Then Olivia's smirk deepened. Without warning, she tipped the glass. Red spilled across blue silk, spreading like a wound. Gasps, laughter, flashing bulbs. The wine shimmered under the chandeliers like blood in moonlight. Jonathan didn't move. He didn't look at his wife. He simply handed Olivia a napkin, murmuring, "Let's not make a scene." But the scene had already become legend. Emily excused herself quietly, her dignity the only armor she had left. The crowd parted like water around a sinking ship. Pathetic. Divorce. Soon. Poor thing. Inside the restroom, silence hit like a wall. She leaned against the marble counter, breathing shallow, staring at the crimson stain blooming over her heart. She thought of her father, the man who built cities and taught her that integrity is wealth. His voice whispered through memory. "Power doesn't scream, Emily. It waits." Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Not here, not for them. She unclasped the ruined gown's pin, wiped the wine from her skin, and lifted her chin. In her reflection, she no longer saw a humiliated wife. She saw something stirring, coiled, awake. "Let them laugh," she whispered. "They won't be laughing long." Outside, music thundered. Jonathan was dancing with Olivia, their triumph choreographed for the cameras. Emily's reflection didn't look broken anymore. It looked strategic. That was the moment her silence became a weapon, the moment her story of revenge began. She fixed her hair, straightened her shoulders, and walked back into the ballroom as though nothing had happened. Every step controlled, every smile deliberate. She even congratulated Jonathan on his speech. When Olivia shot her a mocking glance, Emily met it with a serene, unsettling smile that made the mistress hesitate for reasons she couldn't name. Because Emily knew something they didn't. Humiliation is temporary. Power, once awakened, is forever. As she stepped out of the St. Regis that night, the cold wind cut through her like baptismal water. She didn't yet know that within 48 hours, the same man who mocked her would be kneeling before her desk, unaware that fate had already inverted their places. Morning light crawled through the glass walls of the Hale penthouse, exposing everything it touched. It didn't soften, it revealed. the hum of the espresso machine mixed with the murmur of city traffic below. Jonathan sat at the counter, humming tunelessly, arrogance thick as the scent of his cologne. Across the marble island, Emily stood still, fingers curled around a mug of untouched coffee. The smell reminded her of quieter mornings, before betrayal wore a familiar face. On the table, a tablet flickered with headlines. Mistress pours wine on CEO's wife at charity gala. Hale's cold response sparks outrage. The fall of Emily Hale. Once power behind the throne, now public punchline. Her image was everywhere. The freeze frame of her humiliation looping endlessly across gossip channels, each commentator feeding on the spectacle. Jonathan laughed mid-bite. "You should read the comments," he said between crunches of toast. "Some people actually feel sorry for you. Can you imagine? Poor little Emily, victim of a spilled drink." He slid the tablet toward her, smirking. "I told you not to attend, but you insisted. You can't blame Olivia for having a little fun." Emily didn't look up. "You call that fun? You've always been dramatic," he said lightly. "This," he gestured at the screen, "is just business. Speaking of which, once the merger closes next week, I'll be filing for divorce. It's time we both moved on." Her chest tightened, but her face stayed unreadable. "You mean after your $8.4 billion deal closes?" "Exactly." He smiled as though her pain confirmed his genius. "You'll be well taken care of. I've already arranged the settlement." He slid a manila folder across the counter. "Sign these later. Just formality. Division of assets, joint accounts, the usual. I even handled the paperwork for you." Her gaze dropped to the page. Her name was there, her signature, elegant and blue. Except she hadn't signed anything, flipping through the documents. Her eyes caught a line. A wire transfer. $10 million from their joint account. The same $10 million that had vanished 2 weeks ago. Her pulse began to pound. "When was this signed?" Jonathan shrugged, feigning boredom. "A few weeks back." "Don't overthink it. The lawyers took care of everything." But she wasn't listening anymore. Her mind replayed his words, each one twisting tighter. "Your signature handled everything. Divorce after the merger." She looked up. Really looked at him. The man she'd once loved now sat across from her, scrolling through stock reports, smirking at his own reflection in the black screen. His gold watch gleamed like mockery. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "do you ever think about how you got here?" He laughed. "You mean how we got here?" "Sure, you married up. I worked hard. We built something great. Until you stopped being useful." The insult hit like shattered glass, but Emily didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Right, useful." He poured himself another coffee, still smiling. "Don't look so grim. Olivia and I will handle the social side of Hale Global. You were never built for that. You'll thank me one day." She turned away so he wouldn't see the glint in her eyes. Not tears this time, but clarity. Later, while Jonathan took a call on the balcony, Emily entered his study. The air was thick with the scent of his cologne and deceit. She moved with precision, opening drawers, sorting through folders and reports until her hand froze over a leather-bound portfolio labeled Carter Holdings, Transfer Authorization, her father's company. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a forged signature, her signature, authorizing the transfer of controlling shares from Carter Engineering to Hale Global Holdings, dated months after her father's death. Her breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. He hadn't just stolen her money, he had stolen her name, her bloodline, her legacy. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she closed the folder, her heartbeat steady, her face calm, and she smiled. The kind of smile that could ruin men. When Jonathan re-entered the room, she greeted him with that same gentle expression. "I'll have the papers reviewed before I sign." He raised an eyebrow. "Amused and unaware. Suit yourself, just don't delay." "The merger won't wait." "Neither will I," she replied quietly. That night, while Jonathan and Olivia attended another investor dinner, Emily sat alone at her desk, the folder open beneath the dim glow of her lamp. Shebegin listing every name, every date, every transaction linked to her forged consent. Her mind was no longer clouded by heartbreak. It was sharpened by betrayal. Somewhere in her father's old office lay the truth, and she intended to find it. Before the sun rose, she called a name she hadn't spoken in years. Mr. Whitaker, her father's old attorney. When his tired voice answered, Emily said only one sentence. "I need to know how deep Jonathan Hale's forgery goes." The next morning, the city was still half asleep when Emily arrived at Whitaker & Lowe, a law firm that smelled faintly of paper, dust, and quiet secrets. Rain streaked across the glass walls, turning the skyline into a watercolor of gray and gold. Mr. Edward Whittaker, her late father's longtime counsel, greeted her in his office. His white hair slicked back, his hands steady, but eyes wary. "Emily," he said, standing to shake her hand. "I've been expecting this call for years. I just didn't think it would come from you." She sat down, her posture composed, but her voice calm with purpose. "Jonathan forged my signature on Carter Holdings transfer papers. I need proof. Every document, every authorization trail, every witness." Whittaker exhaled, glancing toward a locked cabinet behind him. "You're not wrong to suspect that your father left all his original trusts and succession papers with me. Jonathan came to see me 2 weeks after Richard's funeral. Claimed he was acting under your authority. I refused him. A week later, he returned with your notarized consent." He slid open the cabinet and laid 2 documents side by side. "Here," he said, tapping the paper, "your real signature and the one he used." The difference was subtle, a loop slightly extended, a curve less sharp. To most eyes, identical, but to Emily, it was unmistakable. She stared at it, her pulse slowing, her fury cooling into Arazor's edge. "He took everything my father built," she murmured. "And used my hand to do it." Whittaker nodded. "He restructured the Carter assets under Hale Global Holdings. On paper, you signed away your inheritance. In truth, you were never notified." Emily straightened, her voice low. "Then he wanted back. All of it. Every asset, every share, every name he corrupted." Whittaker studied her face. The same quiet fire he'd once seen in Richard Carter's eyes now reflected in hers. "You understand what that means? Once you act, this becomes war." "I'm not declaring war," she replied. "I'm reclaiming what's mine." He nodded once and handed her a slim flash drive. "This contains everything I could preserve, the real deeds, the email exchanges, the notarized chain of transfers. Use it carefully. If Jonathan realizes you're building a case, he won't," she said, slipping the drive into her bag. "Hestel thinks I'm broken." When she stepped out into the rain, she didn't open her umbrella. The cold drops soaked into her coat, grounding her in firmament. Each one felt like a baptism, a quiet washing away of the woman who endured and the birth of the woman who would act. That night, she called Ethan Brooks, her childhood friend, a systems analyst who once worked in Hale Global Cybersecurity Division, before being forced out by Jonathan. "Ethan," she said over the phone, her tone deliberate, "I need your help, but this can't lead back to me." Ethan's voice was cautious. "You're asking me to go against Jonathan Hale?" "No," she replied. "I'm asking you to help me expose him." An hour later, Ethan met her at her father's old townhouse. He looked older, wearier, but when he saw the determination in her eyes, something in him straightened. "I can access their servers," he said quietly. "If there's offshore laundering or forged reports, it'll be in their merger archives, but you'll need to play your part inside the company." "If Jonathan or Olivia suspects, they won't," she interrupted. "I'll stay close to both of them." Over the following week, Emily played her role to perfection. By day, she appeared subdued. The compliant wife accompanying Jonathan to meetings, smiling faintly beside Olivia during photo ops. She even attended corporate dinners, wearing that same calm mask that unsettled them both. But at night, her transformation wascient and precise. Ethan sent encrypted files, invoices, offshore accounts, altered timestamps, linking Jonathan's name to embezzled funds and insider trading. Each revelation was another thread in the web Jonathan had woven, and now she was pulling it apart. Inside Hale Global's sleek glass tower, whispers began to stir. Employees noticed small things. How Emily lingered, near the finance department. How she met with mid-level managers dismissed by Jonathan in past restructurings. How she asked questions that sounded innocent but cut too deep. "Mrs. Hale," one executive murmured during a board prep meeting, "you seem very interested in our merger logistics." Emily smiled, her tone light. "A wife should know what her husband is building, don't you think?" They laughed politely, unaware she was memorizing every word. Late one night, she sat in her car outside Hale Global headquarters, watching the reflection of the building's glowing logo on her windshield. It had once been a symbol of success. Now, it looked like a monument to theft. Ethan's voice came through here a piece. I found it. A dummy account in Zurich under Jonathan's alias. Same one tied to the Carter Holdings sale. Emily closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. Good package everything. Tomorrow is the signing ceremony. I want the evidence ready. Emily, Ethan said quietly. You know this will destroy him. She opened her eyes, staring at the tower one last time. He destroyed me first. I'm just returning the balance. When she drove home, that night, Jonathan and Olivia were in the living room laughing over champagne. Olivia's laughter was shrill, the sound of someone who believed the world was hers. Jonathan turned when he saw Emily smirking. Don't stay up too late, he said mockingly. Tomorrow decides everything. Emily smiled faintly, setting her purse down. It certainly does. As she climbed the stairs, the flash drive in her bag pressed against her side. A quiet reminder that she already held his empire's pulse in her hand. Tomorrow would not just decide everything. It would end everything. The next morning, the sun rose like judgment, bright, unforgiving, merciless. Inside the Hale Global Tower, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Cameras lined the press corridor, investors filled the marble atrium, and security swarmed the upper floors. Today was the signing ceremony for the $8.4 billion merger between Hale Global and Armitage International. A deal that would cement Jonathan Hale as one of the most powerful corporate figures in America. Emily arrived insolence. Her cream suit was sleek, deliberate, power disguised as grace. The whispers began the moment she stepped through the glass doors. Some recognized her as the humiliated wife from the gala. Others noticed the poise, the unshakable calm. None realized that beneath her polished stillness lay a weapon months in the making. At the head of the boardroom, Jonathan was all charisma, the press hanging on every word, Olivia glowing beside him like atrophy polished for display. As of today, he announced, voice rich with triumph. Hale Global moves into a new era of innovation and expansion. Together we. The door opened. Every head turned. Emily entered holding a slim leather briefcase. Sorry I'm late, she said softly. Jonathan's smile faltered. Emily, what are you doing here? The same thing as you, she replied, walking toward the table. Making history. The tension rippled through the room like static. Olivia shifted uneasily. The investors exchanged puzzled looks. Jonathan forced a chuckle. You're not authorized to be in this meeting. Security? No need, Emily interrupted, placing the briefcase on the table. I'm already on the board's access list as of this morning. She opened the briefcase, pulling out a stack of notarized documents. The seal of Whitaker and log-linted under the light. Before you finalize this merger, there's something the investors should see. Jonathan's expression hardened. Emily, this isn't the place. Oh, it's exactly the place. She handed the first set of papers to the Armitage chairman. You might want to review these before committing $8.4 billion. The room fell silent as pages turned. The investors' expressions shifted from curiosity to alarm. Emily continued, her tone steady, precise. These documents show that Jonathan Hale forged my legal authority to transfer ownership of Carter Holdings, the engineering subsidiary that formed the foundation of Hale Global. Every signature tied to those acquisitions, she paused, looking directly at him, was falsified. The chairman looked up, voice sharp. Is this true? Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. This is absurd. She's lying. Emily pressed a button on Asmal's device. The projector behind her flickered to life, displaying Jonathan's emails, each one timestamped, each one detailing transfers to offshore accounts under his alias. Ethan's careful digital tracing laid it all bare. One email read clearly, ensure Carter's signature is replicated exactly. She must never find out. Gasps filled the room. Olivia's face went pale. Emily's gaze never wavered. The company you built, Jonathan, was built on theft of my inheritance, my name, and my father's life's work. You didn't just steal money. You stole legacy. Security moved quietly toward Jonathan as the chairman's voice grew cold. This merger is suspended pending investigation. Mr. Hale, you are hereby removed from the negotiation floor. Jonathan stood desperate. Emily, stop this. You can't. I can, she said, her voice like tempered steel. Because Carter Holdings legally reverts to its rightful owner. Me? The guard stepped forward. Jonathan's protest turned into pleading. "Emily, please!" "You don't understand. You did it for us." "For us?" Her voice broke into a quiet laugh. "You poured my father's blood into your empire and called it love." The boardroom watched as security escorted Jonathan out, his voice echoing down the hall, growing smaller, weaker. Olivia stood frozen, eyes wet with disbelief. Emily turned to her. "You might want to find another PR job. This one's ending early." And with that, she gathered the documents, thanked the board, and walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence that would echo across financial headlines for weeks. By sunset, every major outlet carried the story. Jonathan Hale ousted amid fraud scandal. Wife regains control of Carter Holdings. The empire he built in, lies, collapsed overnight. Investors withdrew, partnerships dissolved, and within days, Hale Global was stripped to its bones. Emily, meanwhile, didn't celebrate. She simply worked. From her new office, her father's restored corner suite, she rebuilt Carter Engineering into Carter Global Solutions, focusing on ethical architecture and sustainable design. Her first directive, restore the community housing project her father never finished. 2 weeks later, she visited the old Carter site, the same place where she had once watched her father lay foundations with his own hands. The wind smelled of dust and rain, but this time it felt like homecoming. She walked through the unfinished structure, Thisun dipping low behind the cranes. Workers paused as she passed, respectful but curious. Emily smiled softly, touching one of the old stone beams her father had carved himself. Her reflection caught in a nearby window. No longer the woman in tears before a mirror, but the one who had risen from it. The woman who had turned humiliation into history. She whispered quietly, as if speaking to the ghost of her father. "You were right, Dad. Power doesn't scream. It waits." And for a long moment, she just stood there, head high, eyes forward as the city lights blinked awake around her. Jonathan Hale's name would vanish from the skyline within a month. Olivia Grant would disappear from public view, but Emily Carter Hale would remain, not as someone's wife or victim, but as the quiet storm that rebuilt what greed had tried to erase. Because in the end, she didn't just ruin them. She reclaimed everything they took.